Okay, we are studying in Daniel chapter 8. We have been talking about the vision that Daniel saw about a ram and a he-goat, and we are down to the point now where we're talking about the notable horn that has been identified as being in the Greek empire of the Greek kings. The ram was identified as being that of the Medo-Persian Empire, and the he-goat being that of the Greek Empire. And there was a notable horn that rose up, and we're now at that point where we need to talk about that notable horn that or one of the horns that rose out after the notable horn was broken. We talked about that notable horn, the first horn, that was Alexander the Great. The four horns rose up after him, being the four generals of Alexander the Great that split his empire and became four kingdoms of their own, but it's still being the Greek Empire, Greek kingdoms. And there was, out of one of them, what did I do? There we go. Out of one of them, someone rises up, and we need to talk about who that individual is now. So down in verse 9, we're talking about out of them came a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great towards the south and towards the east and towards the pleasant land. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. And he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down. And the host was given to him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. And it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Okay. Verse 13, it says, And I heard one saint speaking unto another saint, and said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be this vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Okay, we already talked about the fact that Gabriel was the individual that was told to make Daniel understand what the vision meant. And Gabriel is the angel that we see in the New Testament. He's noted also in the Old Testament here. And we talked about the fact that he is an angel. He is a messenger. That's what the word angel means. He was a messenger to Daniel here. I have no problem calling him an angel because he was told to give Daniel what? A message. That's what his purpose was. Okay, so he's a messenger here. Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he was given a message. Okay. He was told it was for the time of the end of the vision. Now we talked about last time when we were together that the end of what? Do you remember what we determined what it was the end of? For the appointed time of the end, verse 16 and verse 17 and also verse 19. What it was the end of? Was it the end of time? What was it, the 70 A.D.? What was it? As so many people will try to make it mean so many different things, what was it that we determined it was? Yeah, verse 23, in the latter part of that kingdom. All right, we're talking about the latter part of the Greek Empire. All right, the latter part of their kingdom. It says, when the transgressors are come to the full. Now, when we go back up here, he was talking about By reason of transgression is what I'm looking for in verse 12. I'm sorry for the pause. There's a particular word for that. The special pause there. Anyway. Okay. By reason of transgression, he says in verse 12, the daily sacrifice was taken away by reason of transgression. Whose transgression? Verse 23, he identifies when the transgressors are come to a full. Whose transgression are we talking about? Why were these things coming to pass? Why were God's people going to be persecuted? They weren't doing what God... Why are they always persecuted? Because they're not doing what God tells them to. They are transgressing. They are doing things that God has told them not to do. All right? So there's a time when their transgression is coming to a full. Many times when God's prophets talked about something, it talks about it coming to a full, or when they use the term as if a woman is pregnant, or something, some other type of language like this. It comes to a point where God can't take it anymore. There comes a point where God will not tolerate sin anymore. There's a time when it becomes so full, so ripe, it so violates his justice that something has to be done. He can't tolerate it anymore. And so now his justice takes over, and now vengeance takes over. And that should teach us something in our system of justice. There comes a time when it's not justice if there's not punishment. And when it should tell us something about the end of time. When we stand before the judge, there's not justice if there's not fear of what? Punishment. And people who keep thinking that God is so loving that he wouldn't punish people in hell don't know God. They need to have that fear of punishment. Now we can stand before him and know that we are in his good graces if we are what? Obedient. Just like he says here, when we transgress his law, there is retribution, there is punishment. He doesn't leave us not knowing what's going to come. He always tells us. He always warns us. When the transgressors have come to a full, when I can't take it anymore, when punishment must be meted out. Okay. So in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have come to a full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. He's going to stand up because they haven't been doing what they're supposed to be doing. People that have been transgressing God's law are going to make this come to pass. Now, are innocent people going to get hurt? Yeah. Whose fault is it? The people that have transgressed. That's their fault. People just don't understand There's consequences for actions. The Bible has always taught that. God has always taught that. But these things are going to happen. Okay, so he says some things about this individual. He understands dark sentences. We'll talk about what that means here in a minute. But we already talked about he's going to stand up. In other words, he's going to have what? He's going to have some power. That's exactly right. Now, it talks about his power in verse 24. His power shall be mighty, but will not be by his own power. In other words, somebody else is going to give him that ability, right? And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper in practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Now, who does that describe, the mighty and the holy people? The people of God, the Jews. To a Jew, that explains that to them, he's pointing at me. I know exactly who he's talking about when he talks about the mighty and the holy people. He's talking to Jews. Back in this point, if you put yourself in the context on that period of time when Daniel is speaking, when he is writing this down, when a Jew would pick that up, a Jew knows exactly who he's talking about. He's not talking to a Gentile. He's talking to a Jew. There's only two classes of people to that individual. You either a Jew or a Gentile. And when he says the mighty and the holy people, he's not talking to a Gentile. Okay, verse 25, and through his policy also shall it cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. That's an interesting phrase, isn't it? And by peace shall destroy many. Think about that for a minute.
The American Standard says, while they are at ease.
Okay.
In other words, perhaps unawares, don't understand what's happening.
Okay. And he shall stand up against the prince of princes. Who is that? It's God himself. He's going to stand up against God himself. Okay? But he shall be broken without hand. What does that mean? Okay, that's a good way of putting it. God's going to be his executioner. He's not going to die in battle. He's not, or things of this nature. He's going to be done in by God. God's going to take care of this individual.
In this particular translation says he was broken. Be broken without human agency.
Okay, that's a good way of putting it. It's going to be broken without human agency, okay? That's a great way of putting it. But again, we've heard that phrase before, something without hand, right? What else have we heard about without hand? Daniel, the 2nd chapter. Something was going to be established without hand. What was it? The kingdom of God. Meaning God was going to establish his kingdom. Okay, so again, we see that same type of prophetic language used, so we know what this means. God is going to be the doer of it. Okay, so all of this terminology that we see in these 3 verses talks about him being a crafty individual, an individual who uses his wit and other individuals to get his work done for him. He's not an individual that uses his army necessarily or his own abilities, but he's what we would call a weasel. What I would call kind of a weaselly guy, right? He didn't earn his rights by himself. He weaseled his way in. He's going to end up with a lot of power, but he didn't get it the right way. He found some way to weasel and to talk his way in and to get, favors from people. Maybe use a little bribery. Maybe talk this person into it this way. And he's going to use a lot of subterfuge and other things to get what he wants. I'm not going to say he's not going to use an army. That's not my point. But to get where he is in a position of power, he's going to use craft, and he's going to use a lot of Weasley type ways to get things done that he wants to have done, and kind of buy and use. It's not going to be a way of what we would call an honorable way of getting things done. Okay? He's going to cause craft to prosper. He's going to, get other people to maybe what's the right word? Compromise their belief systems, and everything's about compromise. If you compromise a little bit here, we'll compromise a little bit there, and you know what I'm saying? You know how icky that makes everybody feel? When I get around a person like that, I feel like I need to go take a bath. And I've met a lot of people like that. That's how some people get things done. And then they feel real good about it. They think they've accomplished something.
Yeah, I think that goes to kind of describe what peace shall destroy many means too.
Correct.
He shall cause craft to prosper, and by that craftiness, or by those crafts, many will be destroyed. I think it won't be like a war with swords and blood, but a lot of people will be taken advantage of and destroyed by compromise.
Well, it's not that swords and things are not going to be used. It's just that what starts it all is the subterfuge, is the compromise, is the I'm gonna pay you to do this. He's gonna use a lot of pay a bribe here, pay a bribe there to get where he wants to go, rather than earn his position and things of this nature. It's going to happen with Rome. It's going to happen with the Jews. It's going to happen in a lot of different places for him to get where he goes, and then after that, the bloodshed starts.
It reminds me in the New Testament where it talks about false teachers who will make merchandise of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, they'll prosper at your demise, and you let them do it. And I think that's kind of that. It seems peaceful because there was some voluntary. Some of this was done through that craft, and so people gave themselves up voluntarily to be used.
Correct. Now let's go into a bit of history, and some of this is going to make a lot more sense to you after we talk about this individual and get to know him a little bit better. And as you read those verses, it's going to really jump out. Now, because Daniel is looking forward, he doesn't see what you and I now looking back and actually can see history, and we can actually see it. He can't look forward and know this. The individual we're talking about is an individual by the name of Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Now he is. Let me get to the page so that you see a little bit about him. This is after Alexander the Great. We'll go down several individuals that gained the throne. We'll talk about the northern kingdom, and we get down to an individual that's Antiochus III the Great, and he conquers a great deal of land and area until the point that Rome starts to push back and allows him or forces him to quit conquering Samaria. This individual will jump out at you. You ever heard that name before, Hannibal? Antiochus III and Hannibal were tied together at one point. Remember Hannibal taking the elephants over the Alps, nearly conquering Rome? Okay, he's tied together with him. This is Antiochus III. Okay. Now, Antiochus IV is the third son of Antiochus III. Now, he is born Mithridates. That's his original name. After he becomes king, he changes his name to Antiochus IV. I suspect this is probably the truth with most of these rulers of both kingdoms, both the Ptolemaic and the Seleucid kingdoms. But it's hard to keep track of all of that because you don't always, they don't in the history books they don't always tell you what their birth names are. But for some reason or another, I learned what Antiochus's original birth name was. He's Mithridates, if I'm pronouncing that correct. But after he became king, then he changed it to Antiochus IV. Okay, so Antiochus III gets in trouble. And so you'll notice here in 190 he has to send Antiochus IV here. I'm trying to highlight just his name. He has to send his son to Rome as a hostage. And you'll see this happen a lot in Rome. They'll take a son or a close relative, and that secures what Rome wants you to do, what the Senate wants you to do. So, you know, we've got your son, we got your close relative, so if you quit causing trouble in Asia and in this area, then we won't put your close relative to death. Yeah. We might consider that not a tactic that we would use today, or but that was a tactic that was quite effective actually in that period of time. So what Rome wanted was a little bit of peace. They wanted everything calm. They didn't want constant wars going on. So even though Rome didn't rule in that area, they still wanted some calm going on because they didn't want it rolling over on them. So they still allowed them to rule that area, but they still wanted it calmed down. So Antiochus goes to Rome. So in this period of time that he is a hostage in Rome, he learns how the Romans rule. He learns a lot about the Roman court and how they take care of things over there, and that intrigues him. So Rome and Greece has some very close ties at that point in time. So he learns a lot while he is there. But his father dies, and so his brother, his first brother, Seleucus IV, now takes the throne. back in Syria. And he is killed, and a usurper, however you pronounce this individual's name, he murders him, and he usurps the throne. So this allows Antiochus IV to go free from Rome, and he gets someone else to help him, another king to help him, and allow him to kill this usurper. And now he takes the throne, and at this point he actually names himself Antiochus IV Epiphanes, which means God manifest. Okay, which is not an unusual title, but most people who call themselves God manifest or God has manifested me don't usually mean that I am a god. But he is going to start coining on his coins and that type of stuff. He's actually going to start making people address him as if he is a god. Okay, he's going to demand that honor. All right. Now he pushes the Greek way of educating children, particularly the boys. Girls were not important. Girls are only for childbearing. That's all girls are for. In fact, the Greeks often would take a girl child because they didn't want them. They would just set them out in the wilderness to die. They wanted boy children. That's part of the reason why homosexuality was pushed in Greek culture. But girl children were for child rearing. That's what they were there for, take care of the house and child rearing. And so boys were for war, for producing food and that type of thing. And so they had gymnasiums for educating the boys and this type of stuff. So he pushed this. He started building gymnasiums everywhere, and that Greek culture. And don't mean to offend anybody, but this is extremely important because this would offend the Jews in the region, that in the gymnasiums and this type of stuff, their athleticism, the perfecting of the body and learning to exercise and that type of stuff was as important as education. And they did this without clothing. And so whether you were circumcised or not circumcised was, shall we say, readily apparent. And the cutting of the body was, any kind of cutting of the body, and particularly circumcision, was extremely, what's the right word? Something that was against their beliefs. You were not supposed to damage the body in any way. So if you were going to cut the body, you might as well commit suicide. They did not believe in circumcision at all. So the Jewish practice of circumcision was detestable to a Greek, and particularly to Antiochus. And so he pushed that. He began pushing that from the beginning. And so he deposes the high priest, and he puts the high priest's brother, Joshua, and by bribing him to change his name from Joshua or Jesus in the Greek term, in the Greek, what we know of in the New Testament as Jesus, it gives him a Greek name of Jason. And you think there's nothing in a name. Changing his name from a from a Jewish name to a Greek name meant a lot, and particularly being the high priest. And so there was a large group of individuals now that are split. You had your Hasidenes, which were your pious, which are called the pious ones, and then you had your Greek Jews. And then, of course, by the time you get to the time of Jesus, the Hasidenes become the like Paul. What's he? The Pharisees, and the Greek type Jews are your the ones that don't believe in the resurrection. The Sadducees, by the New Testament times, because a Greek, of course, does not believe in the resurrection. They believe that once you're dead, that's it. They believe in the body. That's all there is. So you can see this diversion beginning all the way back in this period of time, and we see it now in the New Testament, and how it develops more and more and more, and they become more factionized all the way in the New Testament. Okay, and so these two groups are fighting one another, and it becomes truly apparent that there's a problem. Now, while all this is going on, Antiochus is trying to gain land. He goes down into Egypt, and he's successful in his first campaign into Egypt. But while he is in Egypt, the young ruler in Egypt, what's his name? Pompey the fifth or sixth? I thought it was Pompey the fifth. He's the boy. He appeals to Rome for help. He says, Antiochus is coming down here, giving us trouble and conquering land and that type of stuff. So he appeals to Rome. And so while he comes back through Jerusalem, he finds out that Jason has been deposed, and there's not supposed to be a C in here, by the way. I misspelt that. This individual has been put in let me back up. Jason is deposed by this individual who bribes Antiochus for the high priest position, and then he is deposed by Jason by force, while Antiochus is down in Egypt. So when Antiochus comes back up, he doesn't like what has happened, so he takes, and I believe he executes something like 10,000 Jews at that point in time, and causes a great big deal of trouble. And then he imposes at that point in time very strict rules. They are not allowed to perform circumcision any longer, and there are some, of course, that do that anyway. And then those individuals, mothers that perform circumcision on the eighth day, as is required by the law of Moses, they are taken to the high point of the wall, and their babies are affixed around their neck, and they are flung off the wall. So he performs some horrible acts to individuals, and imposes some terrible things. He profanes the temple. For several days, he offers swine flesh in the temple and pig's blood in the temple. And of course, that profanes the temple at that point in time. It can no longer be used for the worship of God at that time. And and then comes in at that point in time comes in the Samaritans. The Samaritans have had an affinity with the Jews up until this point in time. They've considered each other as brothers, if I read Josephus correctly. But the Jews, not wanting to be part of any of the others, they send bribes to Antiochus, and they set up in Mount Gerizim a idol to Jupiter, and claim that they're going to worship in the Greek way and things of this nature. So they try to butter up Antiochus at that point in time. And so you can see all this subterfuge that's going on, and all the horrible things that's going on all the time. So there's bribery going on. There's people giving up their faith because they're afraid they're going to die. There's all this type of subterfuge going on. So along with just normal murder and oppression. So you can see that this individual is just a terrible, terrible individual, and some of the things that's going on. But my time is up, and I'll have to stop there. But we'll talk about the cleansing in the temple and his end next week. Thank you very much for your kind attention.